What's going on, guys? It is Drew back. We're going to make another video. It's interesting because the one I made about methamphetamines actually got more views than most of my podcast episodes combined, which is funny because I'm trying to figure out this YouTube thing. I got Spotify down and all that, but getting your stuff out in YouTube is interesting, but it's a lot of fun. I'm going to talk today about opiates and fentanyl and heroin and all of that stuff. I got some statistics here that I'm going to bring up. A lot of people already know how dangerous it is, but if you're just checking out this channel, man, I've been sober for over 5 years. My sobriety date is 4/10/2020, and I had died from fentanyl during the pandemic, and then I was revived and I was pushed back in. I went to I don't even know what numbered detox treatment it was, but we lost a lot of people from my drug court. We lost, I believe it was 5 people it was 4 or 5 out of a 10-person men's group that we had on Mondays, and it was all related to this stuff. And it's crazy. It's taking over. It's a scary thing because you're finding it in a lot of other substances. People are buying Xanax on the street, thinking they're trying that for the first time, going, oh, it's an anti-anxiety. I've heard that people take it and they kind of relax and they get some good sleep on it. And then, bam, they wind up dead because it's got fentanyl in it. It's cut in a lot of stuff nowadays. But I found some pretty crazy statistics. Over 112,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2023. That was the highest number recorded in a 12-month period. And that seems to be when fentanyl was really hitting the hardest, but it's still bad today. I mean, I see people on the streets that are just zombied and or like standing up, nodding off, leaning over in the middle of the street, and man, that stuff is powerful. And I remember on my last relapse, I remember trying to find the older opiates, whether it was some pills or stuff like that, and everyone only had fentanyl. It's everywhere. But how does someone end up getting into opiates? How do they end up on opiates? I mean, everyone knows that stuff is bad for you. Everyone knows it's going to make your life go downhill. How does that even happen? I think it happens a number of ways. I know most people, about 80%, started off with pills, whether that was from a doctor, whether that was from an accident, whether it was an older person that had back pain or a younger person that hurt their back somehow. Most people start off with the pills. It's very rare that I find someone that just went straight to the hard stuff. But when you're on those pills, it's weird because you almost feel like it's a safer route. Oh, it's coming from the doctor. It can't be that bad, or it's prescribed. It's technically legal. It's got my name on it. I don't have to worry about getting pulled over with it. It's the doctor's giving it to me. Seems like there's always a little bit of trust because it's coming from a doctor. And I think a lot of people that end up I've literally seen people's grandparents sitting in detox with me, sitting in rehab, that have been taking pharmaceutical pills for years and didn't even understand the compound that it's associated with. I remember one lady, she had been on Xanax for 15 years, took it every day for anxiety. Never tried to get off of it. Just figured, hey, the doctor's giving this to me for anxiety, and didn't even really understand what withdrawal was. Just continued to take it consistently. Wasn't really abusing it that hard, so no red flags came up until she realized she was trying to get off of it. But I think that's very common with the opiates. Most people will start off with the prescription pills, and the problem is, as time goes on, you just start to rely on them so much more. And it's weird because they're treating a lot of times pain, and it works great for pain in the beginning, but as time kind of goes on, pretty soon, if you don't, you absolutely have to have it. You have to. And when you don't have it, you will be in so much greater pain than the pain you were originally avoiding in the beginning. It's so easy to get caught up on that stuff. So easy to get caught up in it. And of course, what happens a lot of times is people make the transition. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to, how many people in the recovery rooms, how many friends, how many people in drug court, how many people in all the various rehabs or treatment centers that I've either worked at or been to that have a story of transition day. Oh, you're not going to believe it. I was in so much pain. I was dying. I was going through withdrawals. I didn't even know what withdrawals were. I looked them up online, and I was puking, and I had diarrhea, and I had my back hurt like hell, and I felt like my skin was crawling, and I had the worst anxiety in the world, and I couldn't sleep for 5 days, and I couldn't eat. I was at my wit's end. I was having a mental breakdown, a legit panic attack. And I asked around, and no one had pills, but you know what they did have? They had a cure for what I had been going through for the last 5 days. And once you can pass that mental kind of loop, once you can pass that fence that has always told you in your life, do not go to those hard drugs. Withdrawals it's a motivator, man. It'll help you cross that fence, and a lot of times people cross over. Another thing that happens too a lot of times is just the money. I remember people paying for Oxycontin, paying $40-$50 a pill, and they just couldn't afford it anymore, and they had a really bad habit, and they were able to just switch over. So a lot of times it's convenience. It's the only thing around. They're going through withdrawals. They've been on it for so long. Or it's the money thing. Or as time goes on, when you've been on opiates long enough, it's just, it doesn't become as scarier to transfer over to the harder stuff. It just doesn't. And I think what happens is people transfer over, and a lot of times, at least a few years ago, they weren't going straight to fentanyl, but now fentanyl is everywhere. It's in everything. It's cheaper than the pills used to be. And people, they just switch over. And once you've switched over and it's no longer scary to be doing that hard stuff, man, your life just starts to go by so fast. You're hyper focused. It's like you have a magnifying glass on those opiates. You feel like you absolutely have to have them. And your body literally does. I mean, when you're withdrawing from opiates, everything in you is literally screaming to get more. Everything. It literally hijacks areas of the brain when you've been using long enough, and starts to affect your critical thinking and decision making, and you could be a completely rational person, but put in those circumstances all of a sudden. This is why we used to see people that were robbing pharmacies years ago with the big Oxycontin thing, and people that had never been in trouble before were running into pharmacies and holding them up and running out with a ton of pills. They were seeing that all over the U.S. And people were like, what's going on? And then they'd catch the person. It's someone that's never been in trouble before, no criminal record, but had a really bad addiction. That's why. It'll turn someone who's calm-mannered, chill, relax, nice, kind, normally cares about people. And when you have that motivation to not feel sick, it's scary what can transpire. And once you're on that stuff, I remember when I first started doing it pretty heavily, and I started at 18, and at that point, everyone was just putting it on a spoon and cooking it up and like snorting the liquid. And which seemed weird. It was not like anything I had done before, but I remember once I felt it. And I found that people, when they try opiates, they're going to fall into basically two categories. And I've witnessed this. I've seen people that have tried it for the first time. You're going to fall into two categories. You're either going to get very sick, you're going to throw up, you're going to be nauseous, you're going to feel like crap, you're going to feel good, but feel like it's going to be too overwhelming, and they will never go back to it. Or there's going to be the second person. Oftentimes they will get sick, they'll get queasy, they will throw up, and they will absolutely love it. And once you've done it the first time, that's it. That is it. And you find yourself just, you just, it's all that you think about. And your whole personality starts to change. And the way, it becomes almost literally impossible to save money anymore. And it's interesting because I was someone who always had a job from when I was 14. I was working when I didn't even need to be working. I remember getting a job at 14, and I was only allowed to work on the weekends. And my parents were giving me everything that I needed. They didn't tell me to go out and get a job, but I just kind of took the initiative. I wanted to have my own money, and I enjoyed it. So I was someone that always worked from the time I was 14, always had different jobs. And the second I started doing that stuff, my whole character started to change. All of my money went to it, all of it. And everyone that I hung out with, what starts to happen is you can't really hang out with your normal friends anymore because you're always having to leave to go get it, or you're always having to hide it, or they're asking you, dude, why do you always look so tired? Why are you sleeping standing up? Why are you always having to lie about stuff? And it gets to the point where you really start to only surround yourself with that underworld, with people that are doing it. And it's kind of a survival tactic. You have to surround yourself with people like that because it's something that you always have to have. Think of it as someone that has diabetes and they have the type where they need the insulin every day. And imagine if you couldn't get the insulin from the doctors and you absolutely had to have it. You're going to surround yourself with people that know where it's at, that know where you can get the needles, that know where you can get the insulin, that know how to do it, that can assist you in doing it. You're going to make sure for your own survival that you surround yourself with people that have access to it. It's the same thing with the opiates. And your friends start to change. The things that you care about start to change. And it has to become your number one priority. And what starts to happen is your life just starts to go really fast. I remember years flying by, just flying by. And I was so hyper focused on getting that stuff. I had to be to avoid the withdrawals. And I remember going, it was a crazy thing because most of the time I would find a way to always get it, but there were times where it'd be at the end of a run and I did not have the energy to go out and get it one more day. I just didn't. And then I would I'd have to get sick. I remember the first time that happened, we had been driving up to LA and we'd been getting a bunch we were younger, we were 18, and we were getting a bunch of these balloons, and this is when they were popular around like 2007, 2008, and we'd go out there and we'd get a ton of them. We'd come back and we'd make all of our money back in like an hour, and then we have just a ton of stuff left on us. And at this point, I didn't even understand what withdrawals were. I had no idea. No one had told me. None of my friends had I witnessed go through it. No one even understood what withdrawals were yet. I remember going into my job. I was a server at a sushi place, and I remember one day going in. I'm starting to feel sick, and I got off work, and I ended up going to the gym. And it's funny too because I was still working out then because I hadn't fully taken over. Because eventually I would say, forget the gym. I don't have the energy to do that. But at this point, it hadn't fully taken over. And I remember going to the gym, and I had this new pre-workout drink. And I remember I'm sitting at the gym, and I'm doing like the bench press, and I'm exercising a little bit. And I remember I had these crazy like hot sweats. Like I was like cold one minute, and then I was overwhelmingly hot the next. And I was like drenched in sweat, and kind of was starting to feel like I had a little bit of a flu coming on. I was feeling sick, and I remember thinking, oh, this is from that pre-workout. Like, that stuff's garbage. I'm never getting that stuff again. I'm never doing that before the gym. And I remember walking out of there, and I go into my car, and I went to smoke. See, because we went from snorting the liquid to smoking on aluminum foil. And that's a sign that that someone is doing opiates a lot of times. If you start finding aluminum foil, or they got black all over their hands from the bottom of the aluminum foil, or we used to call it like basically like war marks on your face, or you got like it looks like a baseball player that has like the black under their eyes, you know, that they used to do during baseball. It's have black all over their face. I used to walk into work with black all over my face. Its hands were always black from the bottom of the smoking it on aluminum foil. Or you start to find straws that are cut, you know, because you light it on the foil and you have the straw, and those are kind of signs that someone's starting to battle that stuff, and their pupils are always pinned. They're always tiny, you know, eyes look super glossy. And I walked out of the gym and I was smoking some of it, and I knew I was in big trouble, because after about a few minutes of smoking it, those slight flu-like symptoms and the anxiety and the sweats and the cold chills and everything and the yawning that I was just experiencing at the gym instantly went away, like all at once. It was weird. Nothing. I had never experienced something like that before. There's never been a time in my life where I've taken something and all of a sudden these flu-like symptoms have disappeared in a matter of 30 seconds or a couple minutes. And that's when I knew, I just intuitively knew, oh no, this is not good. This is not good. And of course I went home and I started to look up opiate withdrawals online, and there it was. And I was a year in. So I had basically been smoking every day for about a year. And that was it. The second I knew about what those withdrawals were, it took me a while to get them for the first time. But once you get them, it seems like it's almost like, I want to say muscle memory, but almost like opiate receptor memory. Like when your body remembers what it's like to go through those, it's so much easier for it to go through it again. And it's kind of this constant fear that everyone on opiates has. There's so many people that are just using today, especially people that are out homeless on the street, or that are literally have given up everything, and they are just using. They're not feeling good anymore. They're not getting super euphoric. Maybe with the fentanyl, because of how strong it is today, they're still like nodding off and falling asleep and kind of getting that numbness and kind of almost like blacking out a little bit emotionally. But when you've been doing it long enough, most of the time you wouldn't really feel too good anymore. You're literally just using just to feel okay, just to not be sick. And I did that for years. And I think if you talk to anyone that did opiates for years, they'll tell you the same thing. You get to a point where it's just survival. You just have to keep going. And those withdrawals are like, they're like the boogeyman. Like you're constantly scared of them. You're always trying to avoid them. And what would happen eventually is I'd run out of energy, and I couldn't go another day running around trying to get money or showing up to work to get money to then go wait in a parking lot and pick up and use. I just couldn't do it anymore. So what would happen is I'd end up just cold turkey going through it. And I'd go through, for me in the early days, it normally lasted like 5-7 days where I would not sleep. I would start to lose my mind by day 5. Could barely eat. I'd be insanely constipated. My stomach would hurt so bad. I'd have these lower pain, like back pain and back spasms that would kill me. I'd have diarrhea and I'd be puking at the same time. I don't recommend that. If anyone's tried that, it's a weird thing to have. But I'm also not eating. I'm not taking enough water, so I'm just kind of malnutritioned and, you know, super thirsty and dehydrated, and I'd have just the absolute worst anxiety in the world. And I'd kind of be waking up to what's gone on over the last year or whatever of numbness and kind of avoidance of everything in my life. And I would go through this anguish. And there was times where I thought I was going to die, but you don't from opiate withdrawals. But I thought I was going to. It felt like I was going to. And I can't tell you how many times I would get through that. And it took some mental strength, man. It took some prayers. It took some talking to people, some support, some hiding away in the dark and just battling it out. I mean, battling it out. Laying in bed, just tossing and turning all night. And what's crazy, and this just kind of goes to the hold this stuff has on you and the significance of it and how strong it really is I would go through that entire ordeal. And eventually around day 7, I'd start to feel better. And then each day I would wake up feeling a little bit better, and I'd get a little bit more sleep, and I'd have a little bit more energy. And within a few days of getting through that, it would literally call me. And you would think that most people would go through that and say, you know what, that was such a nightmare, I have to stay off this stuff. For me, it almost had the opposite effect. It was almost like I made it through this, so if I need to go through it again, I can. And I know how sick and twisted that thinking is, and it doesn't really make sense. And I realize today, being in recovery for 5+ years, that's the insanity of it all. I know that clear as day today. But I would find myself going right back to it, and I just didn't know what to do. That stuff has such a calling on people. I mean, even when you go to a detox, let's say you go to a treatment center, or let's say you get locked up for 6 months or a year or whatever it is, and maybe you go to Salvation Army for a year, maybe you go to Teen Challenge for 18 months, whatever it is, you go to another program for 90 days. You get out, and it calls you. It calls you. And I used to wish when I would get out of these places, wherever it was, and I used to just wish, man, I wish that deep down, the way I feel inside, I wish I knew that I wasn't going to go back to that stuff. But until I was done, it was on. And it sucked because I knew I needed to be done. And I knew that it wasn't going to be good. And I had friends that were dying from it left and right before the fentanyl stuff. I'm talking before people were dying from the opiates, mixing the pills with Xanax and having their respiratory system kind of stop working at night, and kind of the body tells itself to stop breathing, and they just wake up dead. And I had that going on with friends, and inside I just, how do you stop yourself from your insides literally begging to get high when you know you should be done? And you've cold turkey detoxed 10 times, and you've been to multiple programs, and your body still, your mind, body, soul just wants it. And I know today that I never really gave myself a chance, because what would happen is I would go through the cold turkey, or I'd get out of some treatment center, and I didn't switch things up. Didn't switch up my friends. Continued to start off doing other substances with this hope that, hey, at least it's not the opiates. But a lot of times what happened to me is I would end up getting led back down that road within a matter of weeks or a month. I didn't attempt to do any type of recovery program. I didn't attempt to address my anxiety or the way I was feeling, or get an opiate blocker that would help me manage. You know, there's tons of stuff out there nowadays, but I think I tried the opiate blocker once, where you get the shot and it literally just makes it to where if you try and get high, you can't. I wouldn't venture out and try anything that would give me better odds of staying sober. I did not surround myself. I had no type of support when it came to other addicts or alcoholics or people with substance use disorder that I could talk to. I'd show up to some recovery stuff here and there, maybe a meeting here and there, but I never really got involved, never really opened my mouth and shared, never got involved in any type of church stuff or any type of self-help group, or wouldn't really try too hard to find new passions or things to do or find new purpose in my life. I kind of was just hoping that this opiate addiction would float away. And the thing is it just does not work like that. We need to find every possible opportunity to increase our odds I wouldn't talk to a counselor. I wouldn't go see a psychiatrist or a doctor, any type of coach or any type of support. I literally tried to battle it out on my own, by myself, and I found that I always ended up right back to square one. And I also made the mistake a lot of times too. I'd get out of there and I'd swear to myself I wasn't going to touch opiates anymore, but I always had to have a substitute, always. So my idea of doing good was getting out of rehab and drinking a bunch and smoking weed and maybe taking like Xanax or something. That was my idea of, okay, my thinking was, well, at least I'm not doing the opiates because that's what really gets me. But as time goes on, I just end up abusing that stuff. And I kind of just, it's like a cross addiction. It just kind of switches to something else. And with the same kind of goal of, I can't survive day to day without turning to a substance. And at least I'm not on the opiates, but now I'm just abusing everything else. And it gets to the point where it becomes almost as problematic for me because there was nothing that I ever used that allowed me, like I never really used anything in a functional way. It was always over the top. It was always abused. It was always to numb out. It was always to forget. It was always an attempt to feel good all the time. And I just never really had any success with it. So this time around, when I went to the last rehab that I went to, I was pretty much licked. I look back now and I was lucky because I had some people call it the gift of desperation. It's like when you finally reach that point where you actually want to live without it. Like deep down, like you really actually want to live without it. And what essentially ended up happening is I was willing to do a lot more work than I had ever done before. And my goal was to give myself the greatest chances of success that I could give myself. So I didn't pick necessarily one mode of recovery. I said, look, I'm going to throw everything at it. And I started off with the 12-step stuff that we did in the program. I had a counselor, so that helped a lot to be able to talk through a lot of this stuff, start to identify some of my thinking patterns and a lot of the thoughts that turn into kind of obsessions and start to dictate my actions. I was able to kind of walk through a lot of that process with a professional, which was cool. I had tried that before, but I tried only that, and all of a sudden I was doing that in conjunction with a support network of people, and I was living in a sober living when I got out of rehab, and I finally started to have some structure, and I went back to work, and I had some shitty job, but it didn't really matter about the job that I had. It was just the fact that I was showing up to something every day and kind of had a little bit of structure in my life for once. And the living situation gave me a little bit of accountability, which I needed because for so many years when I was running around homeless, I had absolutely no accountability. So I kind of had to ease my way back into that. But I had meetings that I could go to when I was just losing my mind in the early days and wanted to just drink so bad. And I had people that I could call, and I was surrounded by other people that were now sober. And I really had to get away from a lot of the old friends and a lot of places I was going. And by this time, I realized that there was no substance I could really turn to. Anytime I turned to alcohol, within weeks I'm smoking weed, and within weeks I'm right back to the opiates. Just the way it works. I have one off night where I'm pissed off or angry, tired, lonely, frustrated, feel like the world's not treating me right, and sure enough, I'm already not sober because I'm already like drinking and doing other stuff anyway. So I just say, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to get some opiates. I'm just going to get some pills, and then the cycle starts all over again. And I started to try and live by some spiritual principles. I started to try and just adapt to my environment a little bit. I tried to practice some honesty. I tried to not lie about shit and kind of break away from a lot of those behaviors and characteristics that were part of my life in addiction. I started to get into service, started to try and reach out to other people. Maybe I had a month sober. Now I'm trying to reach out to people that have a week sober. And that worked for a number of reasons. Number one, it made me not forget about how bad it is out there. It made me grateful for where I was in that day. And it showed me just the importance of getting out of yourself and not being stuck in a lot of your own bullshit and depression and negative thinking and help someone else out. And a lot of people say in the recovery space that that'll save you sometimes when nothing else will. And I started to get into exercise, and I found that just a slight boost in dopamine each day was sufficient for me to get from one day to the next. And I threw literally everything at it, every single thing at it. And I remember the first couple months that I was in rehab, I got the opiate blocker shot because I said, I didn't want to use it at that time, but I said, you know what? I'm going to get it anyway. Why not? I can go and I can get this thing that's going to completely block me. It's just an extra insurance. And you know what it did for me is it was something that whenever I had thoughts about getting high, which started to get, more rare as time went on, but I noticed that it shut down that jumping down the rabbit hole. Like I would think about it and then I go, oh yeah, it's blocked. And then I would just, the thought would cut off. And because I knew that even if I wanted to, I couldn't get high. That helped me as well. And so that was something that really helped. And I had these men's groups that I kind of talked about how we lost people during COVID. And that was a big deal for me as well. And I started to finally open up because I was someone that rarely would open up about anything. I for some reason, I felt that I needed to just solve this addiction thing on my own. But the thing was, I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And I started to, I did the 12 steps because I figured, why not? There's a chance that this can help me. Why not? And through that process was able to make amends and really identify some problematic patterns in my life and kind of go deeper than just surface level and really start to understand how my brain works and why I continue to make the same mistakes over and over when it comes to substances. The biggest thing that I kind of figured out throughout this whole process, which would seem so obvious to most people, but for me it was not, was the fact that I couldn't use anything. That's where I had always set myself up for failure. And I know a lot of people today that swear by, they say, oh, I got off the opiates and I drink a little bit or I smoke weed a little bit and that's it. And it's been good for me and I get to keep my job and I don't go to jail and my family's in my life. And so if it's something that works for you, that's great. I'm not here to judge anyone or tell people exactly what their idea of sober needs to be. But for me, I realized looking back on my own experience and kind of looking at the years of data that I had on myself on how the problem continues on and on through all the years, a lot of it was the fact that I set myself up for failure from the very beginning because I was trying to use other stuff. And for me personally, it always seemed to lead me back. And I started to really realize that there's some people in this world that recovery has to be the most important thing for them. It has to be. Not everyone. Some people aren't as bad as others, but I found for me, I fall into that class of people, whatever percent, where everything else in my life is contingent or dependent on me being sober. Every single thing. And I know this because anytime I had 3 relapses and anytime I relapsed, everything that I enjoy out of life was pretty much strained or almost gone within a few weeks. And those were lessons learned along the way that really showed me that I have to, it's got to be number one. It absolutely has to. And that was another way that I went wrong for a lot of years is I would work hard to get sober. And the second that I started to feel better, literally right when I started to feel better, I would just let up. It was almost like I felt like I needed to treat myself to a certain extent or for a certain duration of time. And then once, like I would arrive somewhere. Like I was trying to get an A in a class. That's how I treated recovery. I would work very hard at it. I would do all these things that I've just mentioned, and my life would start to improve, and I'd start to work, and I'd start to make money again. I'd start to be self-sufficient, and I'd start to feel better mentally, physically. My mental health would be good, and things would start to improve, and I'd start to save a little bit of money, and I wasn't going to jail anymore, and I wasn't having issues with law enforcement, and I was starting to clean up my record, and I was starting to get pretty balanced in life, and I was starting to feel decently happy or at least content, and I started to have a little bit of peace in my life, serenity. I started to feel pretty good. And I'd have routine, and I had accountability, and I'm eating better, sleeping better, and I have all of a sudden this little fellowship or network of people that I can call, and I have these friends now, and I have these new things I'm doing in life for fun, and I kind of have these new things that I'm passionate about, and I have kind of these new goals and aspirations and kind of things that I want to accomplish over the next couple of years. Right when I get to that point where all that stuff is kind of starting to look decent, that's when I stop. I treated recovery as something that I had to work really hard at temporarily. And then the rest of the time, like I acted as if my treatment of substance use disorder was temporary. So I only had to work on it for a period of time, but it would be long lasting. That's where I was wrong. For me, it was not long lasting. I can't work hard at staying sober for a year and then I'm fine. That's what I found. I don't know if other people are able to do that, but for me, that was a huge mistake I made. I would let up, and it ultimately what happens is it doesn't become a primary focus anymore, and slowly but surely I just start to get a little bit miserable or pissed off, or I start to slack on things, and I start to lose gratitude and appreciation for this new life that I've worked so hard to get, and ultimately old thoughts start to come back, and I start to look at life in kind of a negative shade where things that I used to appreciate are starting to depreciate. And it's and what starts to happen is I start getting kind of isolated, and before you know it, what would never sound good about 6 months prior or a year prior, which would be to drink or to get high, starts to sound good. The things that I've been working hard to avoid start to become an option. And so I learned through a lot of failures that I'm just the type of person that has to have staying sober or recovery as number one. And I've met a lot of other people that are like that as well. We've tried to kind of, and the thing is I would watch some friends that weren't quite as bad as me. They were getting high with me, but they also kind of were able to stop on their own and didn't have to do as much to kind of maintain good mental health and stuff like that. And they would be okay, and their life would kind of go on. So I would see them and I'd say, oh, okay, so I don't have to do as much to stay sober anymore. They're doing pretty well. And I found that everyone's recovery isn't quite the same, and it doesn't transfer over equally from person to person. And I realized that one of the biggest things I had to learn was really figuring out, what do I personally need to feel okay throughout this sobriety journey? What do I personally need? And it has nothing to do with what some other people need. It's really about figuring out, what do I need as an individual? How do I need to treat this problem realistically? Looking back on everything I've been through, all the stuff I used to use, the intensity at which I used to use, the amount, the years, all of my consequences I experienced throughout, add all that together, and what do I need each day to feel good and maintain recovery? So I just wanted to come on here, guys. I've been testing out a bunch of different stuff, trying to make different videos, and I had another episode that just came out with Robert and Susie. I recorded another episode. It's not out yet. Yesterday with Ryan Lee. He's got a sober traveling company. I've got a few more scheduled for this month. All exciting stuff. Thank you for checking out this channel, guys. I appreciate it. Like I always say, subscribe, like, comment, share, and especially comment. I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you do to stay sober. One of the things I am always talking about is it's never over. My treatment is never over. I'm always looking for things to add, ways to improve. Tell me what's worked for you. Tell me what has not worked for you. Have you been close to a relapse before? How'd you get out of it? Did you relapse? How'd you get out of it? How long do you have sober today? All that good stuff. I'd love to hear from you guys. Appreciate you.